And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside once again by Andrew Johnson. And oh man, Andrew, what an MLB season this has been. It has been a little bit of a while since we have talked about Major League Baseball, but with the final games of the MLB season taking place today, we had the first game of a doubleheader, which was by far the best MLB game we've had, maybe not all season, but for the last couple of years. And the final game of this year's season is currently being taken place. I will give the update once that game goes final, but it will give us the full-fledged picture for what this year's postseason is going to entail. But nonetheless, Johnson, as I mentioned, an unbelievable season, leaving us with the first time since 2014 where no team will finish the year with 100 wins in the regular season.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to say it right now. The Dodgers underperformed. Even though they have a number one overall seed in this MLB postseason, they severely underperformed.
Yeah, 90. They did have, what was it, 90? Did they win 96 games?
I think even 95 or 96, but they should have won 120 wins with that
They
roster.
won 98. They won 98.
I don't care. They should have won. They should have been at least, listen, you could say 120, at least 105, 106. At a bare minimum, you should be cracking mid hundreds, maybe 110 or 111. That roster you had. So even though they severely underperformed, they were still by far the best team in the MLB. And it's going to be interesting to see how they respond now in the postseason because, as everyone knows, good old man.
Well, Shohei Ohtani is going to be his first time in the postseason.
Dare I say his name? The manager that blows almost every single postseason he's been in.
Yeah.
Good old our friend Dave Roberts.
I mean, if he
blows the postseason.
If they blow this one, I mean, I don't know what much.
Remember,
else.
He has one good postseason. That's because no fans were allowed to show up.
That's true. That is true. That might be a double play ball. Now, if you're wondering, the update that I'm going to give you guys, it could be coming in a few moments. The Braves and the Mets are playing their final game of their doubleheader today, which we had an unbelievable game one take place where the Mets and Braves went back and forth. Early in that game, Johnson, it was 3-0 Braves going into the eighth inning. It looked like the Mets were all but done. They scored 6 runs in the eighth, took the lead. Then they brought in Edwin Diaz to try to get a couple. I think it was a 5-out save. He gives up 4 runs in that bottom of the eighth. The Braves regained the lead, and as I talk about it, the ground ball to short. Throw to first is in time. The Braves have clinched the final wild card spot. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. But the ending of that game one also saw Francisco Lindor hit a go-ahead 2-run homer in the top of the ninth, giving the Mets the lead and the wild card berth, which would give them a postseason berth. So great job by the Mets. But as I just mentioned, the Braves just won now. That clinches them the final wild card spot in the National League postseason this year. So unfortunately for the reigning defending NL pennant champion last year, Arizona Diamondbacks, their kind of slow end of the season is going to cost them a chance to go back to the World Series this year. So they have officially been eliminated from the playoffs. And now, Johnson, with this final happening, we now know what the matchups are going to be for this year's postseason for the MLB. And as I mentioned, a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of how this MLB season all unfolded.
Yeah, let's go into it, and I don't know where exactly you want to start, so I'll let you kind of lead the show here.
Do we want to go with the NL or the AL first?
Let's go with the National League. Let's leave. I'll give the floor to you and your Yankees at the very end. So let's start with the NL.
All right, so let's start off with the NL, and I guess we might as well start off with the NL East, considering we were just talking about that division. We had the Philadelphia Phillies pretty much from the get-go leading the division throughout the entire year. They really didn't have a spot in the season where it looked like they were going to win the division. They were pretty good for the most part. They did kind of falter, though, at the end of the season, Johnson, which unfortunately is going to cost them home field advantage throughout the NL playoffs. So they were not able to get the top seed in the NL. They will be the number 2 seed in this year's NL playoffs. With the Mets winning game 1 and the Braves splitting in game 2, that leaves the Braves into second place in the NL East. They will be able to take on the San Diego Padres in the first round of the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Mets will go back to Milwaukee, who they just played this past week. They will take on the Brewers, who we'll talk about a little bit. A rough year for the Nationals. They're still rebuilding, and your former fandom of a team, the Miami Marlins, with a 100 loss season, third worst record in the MLB. At least they weren't the White Sox, who we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But any takeaways from the NL East before we move on to the next division?
You can call it the NL East, or it used to be called the NL East, but yeah, 60% of the division now making the playoffs.
Yeah, three teams.
Yeah, 3 teams and 2 teams that didn't even try. So one of the better divisions in baseball. Still, you still have the Phillies as, dare I say, World Series favorites. As much as that pains me to say this,
I don't know if they keep playing the way they played at the end of the year. Maybe not. I think
yeah, they lost a bunch of games to the Nationals, and they lost a couple of games to the Cubs, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
They're
what's
certainly not. They're not
concerning.
so hot right now.
I think what's concerning is because they're the 2 seed, they have to play the Padres or the Braves in that first matchup in the NLDS. So that is probably the worst matchup you can get if you are that Braves team. Or am I saying that wrong? Is it the other way? I always say it the wrong division. Let me look real quick while we talk about it. But speaking of, I'm sorry, I was wrong. They will have to play the Mets or the Brewers in the first round because of the 2 seed. The Dodgers will take on the Braves or the Padres. So
Yeah,
let me
I don't want
rephrase
to
that
play any of
sentiment.
those teams. If I'm a top seed, I don't want to play the Mets. I don't want to play the Padres. So to me, that's just a losing battle right there. The Padres are probably the hottest team in baseball, if not one of the hottest teams in baseball. They have a loaded roster. They have pitching that's finally coming together. They have great hitters, and their hitters are not in a slump right now because they slumped the first probably 50, 60
Wow,
games of the year.
I didn't mean to interrupt your comment while you were saying that, but there is some breaking news that just happened.
Okay.
Um, Pete Rose has just reportedly died.
Wow, that's a shame.
What? Wow.
That is awful, and you always
Dead.
think of the Hall of
83.
Fame with him, but
Yeah.
he lived a full life.
Yeah, the career hit leader in baseball, who obviously was scarred with the whole gambling.
Scandals.
Yeah, yeah, that's tough to hear about now. I was not expecting to make that comment while we were doing our show. So condolences to the family of Pete Rose, and who knows, shots. Maybe this will finally get him to the Hall of Fame in the next couple of years. We'll have to see.
And you know what? If I was in Pete Rose's situation, how they didn't want to put him in when he was alive, they want to put him in posthumously. I would deny it if I was the family. I wouldn't want to take this gesture of goodwill by from the voters for years that say, okay, well, we'll let you in, but you just have to apologize. That was
Yeah.
if I'm the family, I would deny it.
Well, let's go back
Uh,
to
let's go back
our
into
postseason
baseball.
topic. Before we move into the NL Central, I do want to give a shout out to the Mets for how they ended the season. Remember, Johnson, how they started the year. They were playing one of the worst, starts in baseball that they had. It looked like they were going to be done. They started off 0-5. Everything was going wrong for them. And then once the month of May started, that's where the season kind of turned around. And it's gotten them now to the spot where they are in the playoffs. I'm watching right now their current celebration. They probably shouldn't celebrate too hard, considering they have to go back to Milwaukee tomorrow night to play their first game of the NLDS, or NL Wildcard Series, I should say. But great job by Carlos Mendoza, who I know from being a Yankees coach last season. His first year with the Mets, most likely, in my opinion, probably should win Manager of the Year in the National League for what the Mets did this season. So a great job from him, and let's see how they do against the NL Central champion Milwaukee Brewers, who we'll talk about in just a moment. Any final takes for the NL East before we move on to the Central?
Yeah, and at least one of the best divisions in baseball. And can you attribute that to having two bottom feeders at the bottom?
Yeah, you could.
With the Marlins and the Nationals, that these teams could just beat up with and get wins off them, maybe because you certainly
Al-
saw that with another division in the American
Although,
League, which we'll get into later.
although the Phillies and the Braves were struggling with the Nationals and Marlins to end the season, that's also a note for that. But going into the NL Central, I mentioned the Milwaukee Brewers are the NL Central champions with a 93 win season, a very strong year for Milwaukee. Pitching was realistically a big reason why they got to this point in the season. They had a really good offensive start to the year, kind of faltered towards the end, but their pitching was a big reason why they got there. regarded as one of the having the better bullpens in all of baseball, if not the best bullpen in the major leagues. They win the division. The Cardinals, Cubs, both finished in second place with the same exact record, followed by the Reds and the Pirates in last place. But for the Pirates, at least you have Paul Skeens, so there's a little bit of a bright future. He might win Cy Young in the NL. If not him, it might be Chris Sale. We'll have to see what the voters say for that. You still have the Rookie of the Year regardless if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates. But for the other teams, it's going to be a little bit of a shakeup in the offseason. The Cardinals have already been rumored to probably part ways with Paul Goldschmidt. They might part ways with Nolan Arenado. So they're probably going to be trading Sonny Gray. So they're going to be a very different team going into 2025. And then the Cubs and Reds, who knows where they go from here in terms of their team structure. The Cubs have looked like at one point were going to make the playoffs, and then they kind of had a really bad month of May, like as it was kind of a reverse of what the Mets did in May, and that's really how their season unfortunately ended for them early on. And the Reds is just still not there just yet. They do have is still a young superstar, in my opinion, in Ellie De La Cruz, who had another strong campaign this year.
Yeah, you have to talk about Ellie De La Cruz here. What an exciting division here. Just talent, young talent is just all over. Even in the bad teams in this division, there's still a lot of great talent here under the age of 25, under the age of 30. Still developing recent call ups of the MLB. And would you say this is one of the stronger divisions in baseball?
No, I
You
wouldn't
can't give
say
it to
so.
me.
No, I can't. I I've always thought about this with the Central. It's not as good as it used to be. You knew
Well, but here's the thing:
yeah.
from
Go ahead.
top to bottom, I think it's one of the stronger divisions because even at the very bottom, you have the Pirates,
Yeah,
which
they
is
were
a
the
floor you
worst.
really don't
Right.
have. Like the
They were
worst
the
team
worst
in this
last. They were
division
the
is
best.
better than a lot of the teams.
Right. They were the best last place team in terms of record wise throughout the entire rest of the divisions of baseball. So that is true. But at the same time, I don't know if I would give them moniker for being one of the best divisions just because the Brewers were probably the
There's a
only
lot of mediocre
the
teams.
Brewers were the only consistent team in this division worth being anything. Every single other team was pretty much already eliminated a week or two ago, and they had no stakes going into the final week of the season. So that's my problem with this division. And the problem also for me is that it's not like these teams are getting any much better going into next season. The Cubs, maybe, because they still have a lot of sour. It's a sour cap. It's really, I guess it's sour cap, I guess, or budget, whatever it is for MLB. The Reds are still young. The Pirates are still kind of moving into that younger phase, especially if they can get Skeens to be right now, who is probably the face of that franchise already. But the Brewers are the only consistent team right now, and that's despite the fact that they traded their ace Corbin Burns in the offseason, and they still were able to win the division, and they won it by double-digit games. So they did a really good job this season. And also, I almost forgot to mention, they also lost their manager this season, and Craig Counsell, who moved on to take the Cubs job. So that was another thing for the Brewers. They lost a couple big things in the offseason, and they were still able to get back into the postseason this year as a division title winner.
Yeah,
But
and I think that really sums up the NL Central. We can go in the final NL division and
the
probably
West,
the West, which at the very top is probably the best division. With those three teams, I would say
yeah.
those three teams would probably make the best division.
I mean, the Dodgers, you got to think about how this. Remember how the first half of the season went? The Dodgers led this division throughout the entire way. They were playing. You knew it was going to happen. The biggest thing for the Dodgers, Johnson, has been injuries, and that's why I feel like they didn't get that that season that everyone was expecting. The injuries bug this year has hurt them. Yamamoto got hurt for a while. Kershaw got hurt for a while. Mookie got hurt for a while. Freddie Freeman got hurt for a little bit. I think that stuff like that was probably the reason why they didn't have the year they had. You had Otani, which saved your year. I mean, a 50-50 year on home runs and stolen bases, an unbelievable season. Although, I will say, I still would not make him my MVP. I think there's another candidate that should be the MVP for baseball. That's maybe a little bit biased, but I think to talk about the Mets, I think Francisco Lindor probably deserves it more because if you're talking about the award itself, If you don't have Lindor on the Mets, they are probably a bottom five team in the MLB. If you don't have Otani on the Dodgers, we saw it last season. They are still a very good baseball team in terms of how they are constructed. But the Dodgers did have the best record in all baseball with 98 wins. They win the NL West. They have home field in the NL playoffs. They will take on the Braves or their own division rivals, the San Diego Padres, who have kind of had their number the last couple of years in the postseason. So that'll be interesting to see if the Padres get there. The Padres, remember Johnson, if you remember, going in to the All-Star break, were not looking good. They were under 500. It did not look like they were going to make the playoffs. They had an unbelievable second half of the season. Everything was clicking. Luis Arias won another batting title. He became the first player in MLB history to win 3 batting titles for 3 different teams as well. So congratulations to him going accordingly. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who were in the World Series last year, were eliminated with that Braves win. They needed the Braves or the Mets to get the sweep in the doubleheader. So obviously, after the Mets won Game 1, they needed New York to win Game 2. But both the Braves and Mets win. That eliminates Arizona from the playoffs, and that was a tough one for them, considering they started off the year kind of slow. They were another team going into the All-Star break like the Padres, where they had a strong start to the second half, but the final month of the season, September, is what ended their season. A really bad last 2 weeks of the year really hurt them and unfortunately eliminated them from this year's postseason competition. So they'll have to regroup going into the winter meetings this year. And then to round out the division, you have the Giants, who maybe for some people, including myself, because I thought maybe they'd be a little bit better than this. They finished 2 games under 500 despite some moves in the offseason, getting guys like Blake Snell and Matt Chapman. We'll see how they go into next season with now a new baseball head of operations, Buster Posey, their former NL MVP and 3-time World Series champions, going to lead the baseball operations management for this Giants team. And then to round out the division, you have the Rockies, who just continue to be an absolute train wreck of a organization. And I feel bad for Charles Blackmon, who officially announced his retirement this past week. He no longer will be playing in baseball, and unfortunately, he had to play his last couple of years in Colorado, a team that he played for his entire career, but they just were never able to get him anything remotely
Hey.
close to a
He
contender.
has more postseason appearances than Mike Trout.
He does, but they were never ever close to doing anything in the postseason. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I know. It's just a real shame. And
Yeah,
you mentioned about MVPs before. Do you know what the opening odds were for Shohei Ohtani and Francisco Lindor were for MVP?
Otani was Otani like minus 500, something like that.
He was plus 1,000 opening day.
Oh, okay, that was not even close. Okay,
Lindor was plus 2,500. The
yeah.
favorite opening day, it was Ronald Acuna Jr.,
Mm,
then it was Mookie Betts. Then it
mm-hmm.
was Freddie Freeman. So they thought there were 2 other
Otani was the fourth.
Dodgers.
Really?
Yes, opening day, according to MGM, Otani was
Okay.
their 4th uh, shortest odds to win MVP, and the third for the Dodgers. So that's crazy. And for the American League, it was we'll go into the American League later. I won't spoil that. But what I do want to say about the NL MVP is, would I give it to Lindor? I would maybe give it to Lindor because the definition of MVP, it's not just playing
You're the
one
most
side.
valuable player on your team.
And here's the thing, he plays both sides. Otani did this as a DH. I'm not taking away from the 50-50 season. It's absolutely incredible. Probably the best player in baseball right now, from an individual standpoint, at least offensively. But when you take when you put defense in the equation, he's a DH. He does not play the other side of the ball. Yes, he does pitch, but how many innings did he pitch this season? So if Otani did this when he was pitching, I don't think it would even be a question. But since he did this as a DH, you kind of have a little bit more
Like
scrutiny to it.
I feel bad because it's gonna come. You know what? I will say this. I also feel the same way in the AL. You'll see, and I'll make my point about that in a little bit when we get to the AL. I feel bad for Lindor because he's probably not going to win it, and he very much well deserves it. And remember, he started the year off really badly. There were fans booing him. He was kind of like in the same boat where the Mets season went. Then once May hit, not only did the Mets start taking off, he started taking off, and he ended the year in the biggest way possible by getting them that 2-run homer in the ninth inning in the first game of that doubleheader today. That clinched them that playoff spot. And if not for that home run, they would have had to win that second game that they just finished up now. That would have potentially got them into the playoffs or would have ended their season. So Lindor certainly deserves it, but unfortunately, I think he's going to get screwed over by the writers, and I think it's probably going to go to Otani, unfortunately. But like I said, I in the AL, there's also that two-headed race as well. Even though, I mean, we'll segue into our next topic for the AL recap. Aaron Judge absolutely deserves it, and there's no bias to that. You just look at the stats he had this season. He was first in every category besides one, and that was batting average. And the guy that led batting average was Bobby Witt. And Bobby Witt deserves an MVP award too, because he had an unbelievable season, and he's a reason why the Royals are at where they are at, which we'll recap now.
Well,
Now,
actually, I have a hot take about the Royals, but not Bobby Witt, because I think Bobby Witt, I said this a couple years ago, is a generational talent. You just need to give
yeah,
him time because he came out the gates as an above average hitter overall and from the shortstop position. When you have that from the shortstop position, when you have an above average hitter from the shortstop position, you have to take note. But let's
yeah.
go. I won't go too far in the bed right now.
Yeah, all I'll say is for Bobby Witt is I'm very happy because he was my sleeper pick to win MVP when we made our original picks at the beginning of the year. And I'm very happy that he was able to get the season that he had because he was a big contributor to the Royals season this year. But going into the AL, we'll start off with the AL East. The Yankees were able to win the American League East. They started off the year really hot. They had a little bit of a falling part going into the All Star break. They were going back and forth with Baltimore for the division lead. They were able to pull away just late in the season to win the division. So I am happy. They do have the best record in the AL. I'm still a little bit have a cause for concern. It's probably one of the weaker ALs we've had in a little bit because anyone realistically that made the playoffs this year in the American League can go on to win the world, go on to the World Series. I don't know about winning it, but they certainly can make it to the World Series for sure. So the Yankees do win the division with 94 wins. Baltimore does make the playoffs despite not winning the division with 91 wins this season. Um, they had a little bit of a falling the last couple months of the year. They were able to still make a wild card. They almost could have made noise at the last week of the season if they were able to sweep the Yankees and maybe could have still won the AL East. But getting a guy like Corbin Burns is going to help them for the postseason run. The biggest concern for them, Johnson, is going to be their team's bullpen going into the playoffs because that has been a train wreck. You consider they don't have Felix Bautista for this season. The Red Sox finished at an even 500, very up and down year for them. It looked like they were maybe going to try to make the playoffs going into the All Star break, but a bad second half, unfortunately, well, maybe not for me, unfortunately, but for them, unfortunately, ended their year. Tampa Bay had a really bad season. We saw it kind of the writing on the wall at the trade deadline with them trading a Rosarina and a couple others. They finished 2 games under 500, and Toronto finishing 14 games under 500. And I think, Johnson, this is probably the star of the writing on the wall. You might see a different Blue Jays team on paper next season, and don't be surprised if they make some moves in this upcoming winter meetings.
Yeah, it's a real shame because this Blue Jays team had a lot of potential. They showed it too. They made some moves in the offseason, like getting Dalton Varsho. Vladdy Guerrero had a phenomenal season, like almost a bounce back season because he wasn't doing so hot last year.
He started out
He
this
got
year
back
bad
in
too.
yeah, he got it back in the MVP form. George Springer, I think, is where you see the real decline here. He's not the Houston Astros George Springer. I
Yeah,
realize he's
not even
kind of
close.
closer to home, playing in the Northeast rather than Texas, even though he's playing in Canada and he's a tri-state guy. Uh, you really have to feel for him because you have guys like Bo Bichette too, missing half the season. He didn't really play that well either. So you want to see him do well from uh a non MLB, just from an MLB standpoint. Not like if you're a Yankee fan or a Boston Red Sox fan, you don't want to see him do well. But from a baseball perspective, you want to see him do well. And their pitching also took a hit this year. You have a man that can't stay healthy, can't stay on the field. You have Alec Manoah now. Are we gonna call him a one hit wonder now?
He
Because
hasn't been
even
the
when he
same since
started
the
to
pitch
pitch,
clock.
yeah, even when he started to pitch well, right? Even when he started, okay, he actually showed some solid innings. He got injured. He's been out now. That's it. So this may be the writing on the wall for his career too, which sucks because if as a pitcher, like you're pretty much done now. You've been up in the major leagues now for almost 4 or 5 years, and you had one off season, and that's pretty much it. Like that's kind of goodbye now.
Yeah, so who knows what the Blue Jays do? Because remember, Vladdy's also, I believe, an incoming free agent soon, as well as Bichette. don't be surprised maybe if they get traded maybe this offseason. I remember at the deadline, maybe they get traded. This could be the time maybe they get dealt because you see sometimes in the offseason at the winter meetings that I mentioned a little bit, that's when the moves most of the time get taken place. The GMs and executives are all in the same spot at the same time. There's going to be some talks and some conversations about maybe making a trade for one, if not both of those guys during this offseason. But
And I just want to talk about Tampa Bay really quick. Just kind of painfully mediocre. You kind of figured that their farm system would bring up some good players.
not
That's
having
it.
McClanahan hurt.
Yeah, I mean, and we got to talk about Baltimore too. I said a while ago that Gunnar Henderson was going to be the best player out of all these young kids, and so far, he looks like he is.
Yeah, he was an
Uh,
MVP candidate for a little bit,
MVP candidate. Heston Kjerstad finally played some significant time.
and then he
He's
got sent
looking to
down
be an
again.
MLB quality player, so he's
I
fine. And
think
you have to talk about Colton Cowser too. Colton Cowser is an up and coming player that he looked pretty good this season
I think
for a
for
first time player.
Kerstad, he needs to. I don't want to like say he needs to get traded, but I feel like if he's on a different team, he probably gets a little bit
He'd
more
break
time to
out.
shine. This is just a tough roster to be on, and you still have Jackson Holiday also, which is another player that the Orioles have in their back pocket as well. But as I mentioned, the biggest concern for them this postseason is going to be their bullpen. Can they be, are they going to be able to close out some games? So Anthony Dominguez is a guy who they got at the deadline. He's right now technically their closer for that team because they've had so many guys back there trying to get the saves. They had the DFA Craig Kimbrell about a month ago. He was, the guy that had to replace Bautista after he went down with an injury before the season even started. So that's definitely the biggest cause for concern for the Orioles going into this postseason compared to last postseason. But now shifting our attention to the AL Central, surprisingly, Johnson having the most teams making the playoffs this season, which we never thought would be said going into this year. The Guardians finishing with 92 wins, the second best record in the American League. A great year for Cleveland, despite the fact that they did not have Shane Bieber for the entire season. They only had him for one start, and then he needed Tommy John. So a good job by Cleveland. Obviously, Emmanuel Clase, one of the best closers in all of baseball, was great. Jose Ramirez had an MVP type of season, so a very good year for Cleveland. We saw the Royals having a mark out season, a big, early start of the year for them. They kind of had an iffy second half, but they were still able to get into the playoffs as the second wild card. Great year for them. Bobby Witt, as we mentioned, was an MVP candidate for a little bit of time. We saw Seth Lugo as a Cy Young candidate. So they both had good years. The Royals itself with a marquee season as well, because this is the first time since they won the World Series back in 2015 that they are into the MLB postseason. So great job by the entire Royals. And surprisingly, Johnson, the Detroit Tigers are the final wild card team. They make it this past weekend. Their first playoff appearance, I believe, since I want to say is it 2014 or 2012. I want to look it up real quick. Is their first postseason appearance is 2014, and think about their season as well. There was a point, Johnson, where they were 65-66 at one point in the season. They lost only 10 games down the stretch of the year and went 21-10 in that mark to go to 86-76, make it as the final wild card. And a big reason for that is their star pitcher Tariq Skubal, who's probably going to win the AL Cy Young. He won the Triple Crown for pitching stats this year in the American League. Huge reason why they are at this point in the season. And as much as I don't like him, manager AJ Hinch, will have a chance at redemption to take on his former team that he used to manage. And then rounding out the division, the Twins with an awful second half. They had one of the worst collapses you'll see in recent memory. Looked like they were at one point, Johnson, I believe, a game out of first place. They were 70-53 at one point. They only won 12 games to end the season and finish 82-80. Disaster to end the year for them. They missed the playoffs. And then it goes without saying, the White Sox with one of the worst seasons you'll see in recent memory. 121 losses, the most losses in modern day baseball history. Um, I would say there's bright spots. I guess Garrett Crochet maybe is the lone bright spot on this team, but man, they're just unwatchable if you were a base White Sox fan this year. And I guess you could only I guess it can't get any much worse than this season, right?
Sure. I have one stat for you.
Yeah, go for it.
What is the Chicago White Sox record against all other teams in their division? How many wins you think they have against the Guardians, the Twins,
Oh, I think
the
I saw.
Royals,
I
and the
think I.
Tigers?
I think I saw this. I think they had one win against Kansas City. I know that for a fact.
Yep. Yep.
Um, you know why I know that, Johnson? Because I bet that game. I
You
was
bet him on a
responsible.
doubleheader. That's why.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay. Um, I want to say 10 wins.
10 wins is on the money. The
Nice.
Twins went 12-1. The Guardians went 8-5. Surprisingly, Kansas City went 12-1, and Detroit went 10-3. You could thank the Chicago White Sox for giving two teams postseason berths here, because
Yeah.
if they were put in any other division, they would not be in the postseason right now. You'd probably see teams like Seattle or Texas in the
Hmm.
postseason. You'd probably see
Boston,
uh,
Tampa.
you probably see Boston and Tampa. Listen, it's just that's how it is. When you have a team that's this bad, you could pad your stats against them. Listen, I'm not saying anything wrong against the Royals, but when you when you pretty much have 86 wins on the year, and 12 of them are from the
Your division
uh
mate.
yeah, from one team. If you have 14% of your wins on the year coming from one team, and you know that team's tanking, you know they're bad. Not saying anything against it, but I would actually kind of bet against these teams in the playoffs. I'd bet against Kansas City. I'd bet against Detroit, because these teams, on paper, these are great stories, but do they deserve to be here? Probably not. And that's
Well,
nothing against Bobby Witt, because he's probably the second best player in the American League right now.
oh yeah, by far. Hey, he's gonna finish second in MVP voting behind Judge. Um, do you? I don't know if you have it. If you're looking at it currently at the moment, I guess this will also be for our viewers, our listeners at home. Did you know what the White Sox run differential was this season?
I actually do know what it is. It is negative 306.
Yeah, that is eyesore. And remember,
That
can
is
you?
more than the Athletics, Angels, and Blue Jays combined, and the Tampa Bay Rays combined.
Yeah, the Angels, for everyone knowing, they have 162. That's how bad it was for the White Sox. And keep in mind that the richest contract they've given out in their team history is to current Andrew Benintendi. So that just goes to show you how everything's going wrong. Moncada was one of their highest players. I think he played 10 games at most this season. I mentioned it's a train wreck for the White Sox right now. They are just pathetic right now. They have one bright spot in Crochet that is probably going to get traded at some point because they're just not going to be able to afford him, or he's just not going to want to play there once he becomes a free agent, which I don't blame him at this rate. Um, it's probably gonna get to the point, Johnson, where Reinsdorf is, the fans are already clamoring for Reinsdorf to sell the team, but we know he's probably not going to sell the team anytime soon. Yeah, just a sorry, White Sox fans. It's tough. To think that this team won a World Series in 2005 and now where they are currently, 19 years later, I mean, it's just crazy to think that they lost this many games. So congrats to the Mets also because they don't have the most losses now in modern day baseball history. So Mets get a little bit of a couple shout outs here on the show this week. But to round out the AL, we have the AL West, a division in which it looked like early on, Johnson, the Mariners were going to probably win after a slow start from the Houston Astros. The Astros had a very good end of the first half of the season that got them within striking distance of the AL West, and they were able to pull away in the second half of the season to win the American League West this year with an 88-73 mark. The Mariners missing out on the postseason by just one game in the wild card. And there's a key moment, Johnson, for the season that they had an opportunity to make the playoffs, and that cost them the year. They had a game against the Royals where they were up 8-0, I think, throughout 4 innings. And they went on to lose that game 10-8, I think was the final. So that's a game they would certainly love to have back. The defending World Series champion Texas Rangers are eliminated. So crazy to think the two teams that played in the Fall Classic last year are not in the playoffs this season. I don't remember the last time that has happened, but that is the case for this year. The last year of the Oakland A's ended with a at least a good win on the Coliseum, but just I don't want to say disaster on the field for them, more of disaster off the field. What's going on with Oakland? I really feel bad for that city losing not only the Raiders a couple years ago, but now losing the A's. We'll see how much
They
sooner
also
they'll
lost
move.
Golden State too. Don't forget about that.
Right, right. I did forget about that. They lost Golden State as well. Yeah, I really feel bad for that city. They really do not deserve everything that's going on, and now they have no
At
professional
least they
sports
moved. At
teams.
least for the Warriors, they moved
They're
across
still
the
right.
bridge in
They're
San
still at least
Francisco. But no,
close.
it's not there. It's like going from the Bronx to like Queens for teams. Imagine if the Mets moved from
Right,
Queens to Brooklyn. Like, yeah, it kind of sucks, but at least it's right next door. Like, it's
but
not the
like
end of the world.
move, but like just moving them out. Like you got to. The A's are like one of the like. There was a whole movie made about this team in 2000 for the 2001 season, and just poor ownership is where they're currently at now, and now they're going to be. We'll have to see where they play baseball in 2025. You have to think they're gonna be moving to Vegas soon, so there's that. I feel bad for that entire city for what's been going on for them the last couple of years. And then the round of the division, you have the Angels. I mean, another year with Mike Trout's out. Can't really say much more. Pitching is still terrible. First year without Otani obviously went terribly, and they had the worst record, second worst record in the American League. If not for the White Sox having the year they had, it would have been worse. And keep in mind, Johnson, the White Sox actually swept the Angels to end this, during the last week of the season. So that just goes to show you how bad the Angels have been this entire year. So that's pretty much how the AL West ended up going, and it leads us now to the MLB postseason this year.
And with that
Um,
being said, I think we can start our mushing hour now, can we?
We can, yeah. So what we'll be doing is we'll be breaking down the wild card series that we will be having this week that will lead us into the divisional round series for next week. And while after we finish our wild card predictions, we will be giving our first incorporation of our World Series picks. Now, I have to look back, Johnson, to see what our original picks were. I'm pretty sure, if I had to guess, they are probably most likely done for what happened earlier this
I
season.
did
But
pretty good actually.
I think you might have the only. Do you have the only chance of making it?
For my postseason team, I believe I do.
I have to look back really quick. I'm looking at it right now. You had, unfortunately, no, because the Diamondbacks were eliminated. So, yeah, you
Oh
did.
well, I
However,
was close.
I'll give you credit for this. You did have the most division winners correct. You had
That's
the
what I was
Astros,
talking
the
about. I know I
Guardians, and the
did.
Dodgers. And you had the
Yes.
Padres as a wild card team as well. I will say the Tigers didn't win the division, but they made the playoffs, so I'll take that as a consolation prize for me. Um, but yeah, all of our World Series picks, unfortunately, uh, actually Russell's actually has a chance. No, you have. Oh, I'm sorry, I looked at Russell's pick. That was my mistake. You still have a chance for your World Series. You have the Dodgers and the Astros. So
Yes, I knew I
apologies.
still had one.
Right. I was looking at Russell's pick. That's apologies. Shout out to Russell for helping us this season, and we'll be sure to have him at one point during this MLB postseason run. But let's start off with the first wild card series that we're going to be taking place, and we'll stay in the American League, the AJ Hinch Bowl, maybe if you want to term it like that. The six-seeded Detroit Tigers taking on the AL West champion Houston Astros. Uh, Interesting series we have between these two teams, Johnson. The Tigers, a lot of people think, could realistically pull off an upset in this series. Do you think that's going to be the case?
Absolutely not. Give me the Astros here. Give me the Astros in a sweep.
Damn, you got them in a sweep?
In a sweep. Not going to even be close. This is a team that should not be here.
Okay, all right. So, hmm. I want to give the Tigers, I want to give them some credit. I really think they can maybe pull this off. Now, am I saying that because I want the Astros to get eliminated? Probably. Probably. Um, hmm. What? Who do I think wins this series? I'll go with the Astros to win. I'll go 2 games to 1. I think the Tigers will take game one. The Astros will take the next two. So give me Houston in three to win that series. Staying in the American League, we go now to the two other wild card teams, the Kansas City Royals taking on the Baltimore Orioles. Who do you have in that series?
This is interesting because I think the Bobby Witt effect here is going to kind of come out full steam here. So with that being said, I'm still gonna go Baltimore here, but give me Baltimore 2-1.
Uh well, as a Yankee fan, this is an interesting series for me because the winner of this series does take on the Yankees, and I'm not looking forward to playing either of these teams. For me personally, I probably would rather take on the Royals, but I don't want to be that person that's going to run away from the team that should be getting into that spot, and I think that is Baltimore. So I will go with the Baltimore Orioles, and I will also go with them to win in 3 games, 2 games to 1. Now our next series, and this is now official with the what happened earlier tonight. The New York Mets taking on the NL Central champion Milwaukee Brewers. Who do you have in that one, Johnson?
That is a great question. I like the hot team here. I know they just lost a couple games to the Brewers here, but give me the Mets 2-1.
I,
You
I
gotta believe.
Russell, I'm going to do this for you. I know you're going to be listening, so I'm going to do this for you to ensure your team does not get mushed because both Johnson and I picked them. I will go with the Milwaukee Brewers to win in this series 2 games to 1. So I'm pulling for you. Hopefully you win. I'm just going to pick Milwaukee to ensure that there's not a full mush because the way our football season has gone, I don't want to push that into our MLB postseason talk. So that one is for you, Russell. Hopefully the Mets do pull it out. But to end our wild card predictions, we have the Atlanta Braves taking on the San Diego Padres in the matchup with the two highest wild card teams. This is going to be a good matchup between these two teams, Johnson, with the winner taking on the Los Angeles Dodgers. Who do you have in the series?
Give me Padres in the sweep here. They're not
Ooh,
gonna have Chris Sale, and they're gonna win the second game too. Give me the hot team.
yeah, I am very concerned about Atlanta right now. But I still think they get a game in this off the Padres. I go with Padres 2-1 as well in this series. Not really, I probably should pick a sweep. I'm going with a lot of 2-1s, but I'll say this: if there was one series to get the sweep, I do think it could be this one. But now, with that being said, we'll be previewing our divisional round series once the wild card series are all over, and we'll recapping the wild card series as a whole as well. Johnson, what is your first iteration? Are you going to stick with your original World Series pick, considering that your two teams are still alive?
Dodgers over Astros, right? I have to.
Yeah, you might as well.
I have to stick with it. If I said it in February, I have to keep on talking about it now. So give me Dodgers over Astros.
Now, since I didn't want to mush Russell and the Mets earlier, I'm going to now mush my own team, the Yankees, too. Because I know if I do it, then I'm going to get my heart broken for a multitude of reasons. I will also go with the Dodgers. I'm actually going to do Orioles over Dodgers for my World Series pick. That is going to be mine. Um, I'm still a little bit concerned about their bullpen. Actually, I'll switch. I'll go Dodgers over Orioles. I still, I realistically think the Yankees. This is the top to be there. You know what? I'm changing it one more time. Dodgers over Guardians. Final, lock it in.
There you
No,
go.
no
All
more.
right,
Yeah,
Dodgers. We both
I,
have the Dodgers winning. So
I,
congratulations on the
I was,
American League.
I was talking myself. I was trying to talk myself into going to Baltimore, but their bullpen's so concerning that I'd be safer taking Cleveland. Cleveland has the best thing going for them out of all the teams in the AL, Johnson, and that is they have a shutdown closer. The rest of the teams in the AL, they realistically don't have that shutdown closer. So that's the biggest concern for each of the other 5 teams going for them. So, like I said, I obviously want the Yankees to be in that spot. Hopefully, they get to the World Series, maybe even win it. I'm not gonna get my hopes up because they keep letting me down. But I will go with the Dodgers over Cleveland. Mushing hour. Hopefully, the mush goes into a full effect because we obviously don't want to see a Dodgers World Series this year. That's why we're both picking it here on the show. But That's going to do it for this edition of the Mushing Hour, and we'll see how the wild card series for the MLB season unfolds. Any final takes on the regular season, Johnson, and what are you looking forward to the most come postseason time? I was not expecting that.
Come on, you're looking at New York Mets baseball. That's what you're excited about, right?
I'm never thrown off sometimes in the show, maybe rarely. That was one of the times where I've been thrown off. I was not expecting that. That was not talked to pre-show as well. So
I gotta keep you on your toes.
You do.
It's gonna meet the Mets this postseason, but what Mets are you gonna meet? Are you gonna meet the hottest team, the MLB Mets, the team that made 2 rallies to come back in the 8th and 9th innings today?
Yeah, what a game.
What a game that was. Or you can meet the Mets of May. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for the Mets, and I'm looking forward to see what they do this season. This postseason.
Well, some might say it's not about the money, Spider-Man. It's about the Mets, baby. Love the Mets. Hit a home run. Let's go Mets. But then again, let's go Yankees because all I'm saying is I think Russell and I will both agree we would like to see a Subway Series for the World Series this year. That would be fun, especially between the two of us to see how that one would unfold. But we'll have to see how our teams do in this MLB postseason. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. The MLB regular season has concluded as of today. We now know the 12 teams in this year's MLB playoffs, and we'll have to see how these wild card series all go down. Tigers and the Astros, Royals and the Orioles, Mets and Brewers, Braves and the Padres, with the Yankees and Guardians, and the Phillies and Dodgers are waiting to see who they will play in the respective divisional series. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by Andrew Johnson with the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week, and good luck to the teams in the MLB postseason.